make up that deficit, but usually it's cost savings from open line positions, reduction in staffing, reduction in hours where we can, all of those things to make it work.
If you look at where our budget is, you've got over $7.5 million of our $9 million budget in salaries and utility bills. Sorry. It doesn't leave a lot of room for true change the needle on. We can reduce travel. Sure, we spend $20,000 or $30,000 a year in travel. Take it down to 10. It doesn't really move the needle. And so, unfortunately, positions is the largest budget item, and so that is generally where we would look first. We have never cut somebody's job. We've never furloughed anybody, which we're super proud of that. Obviously, we have held positions and we make strategic decisions every time a position comes open. Do we hire? Do we not? That is a conversation Dwayne and myself and the rest of the directors will have every time we get a vacancy, and we think through that very strategically to make sure that we're making the best decision for the students, our guests, the right team of staff, et cetera. And so it's really where we look first, knowing we want to preserve jobs as best as we can.
Following up on that, so obviously you have the 981,000 shortfall for 27-28. Where do you what have you been seeing in terms of like cash flow, like the real deficit that you guys are losing every year at the end of the day, like after expenses, or is that like net neutral?
So this last fiscal year that it just ended, our deficit was in the 550,000 range. And so we made that up with cash on hand. So we have cash on hand in our auxiliary, and so it came straight out of cash.
And that's a budget exercise that we do regularly. So we do a forecasting thing as well, and we probably add that into our budget presentation next year, where we go 10 years out and assume some of those things. Assume positions not being filled, and there's that 8%. There's a best practice number that we can use for that. We assume if X, Y, and Z is going to happen, we take all of those things out. And in years past, we presented that to the vice president of student life to think about what things could and could not look like. That also helps us with our budget decisions. So we do forecasting, we do capital renewal and replacement, and so that's how we come up with those mitigations for that number. What we show you is that if all the positions are filled at all the time, best case scenario, but we know that that's not true, but this is how we make it work.
And so we are super helpful with your support, student government support, that you will assist with the ASP portion of the overhead assessment going away. Again, that's $500,000 of our 981. So that will be a huge relief to our budget.
How much cash do you guys have on hand?
Just under $2 million.
Reserves, you mean?
Yeah.
You say reserves, so cash. Depending on how you say it, you think different. Reserves is the word.
So, like when the chiller, like you mentioned, like the chiller failed this year, and that was it 700,000 to replace? Mm-hmm. Does that come directly from that like reserve account, because that's not built into any like budget line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just this week, Anthony just told me about a leak that is over in the food court, which sends to me makes me super nervous, because then I'm now thinking about roofs, and roofs are quite expensive to replace as well. And so hopefully we're not in that space. But if we are, with the building the renovation being 10 years old, I wouldn't be surprised if we're starting to consider roofing challenges, like our good friends over on Roof Companies. So yeah.
And then like on the maintenance slide that was shown earlier, with like the 5.5 million maintenance projects, are those also kind of things that like if those break, those will just have to come from that reserves as well? Because
largely.
Okay.
Yep.
Largely, but there are other, capital improvement trust fund is another way that we try to utilize those other funding sources. We very frequently come to you and ask for support and help, and a lot of times we try to make sure those are student-focused projects and not chillers or something that's, something that students won't see the benefit of. But yes, that's kind of where we attempt to utilize all the different funding sources. If there comes a time where we need to do a repair, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, and we don't have the reserve funding, then we look at loans, and that's how we got into that place where we had that ESCO loan that was just paid off. So we don't want to get back into a situation like that. It certainly is more costly, as we all know from personal budgeting, right? Like if you take out money, you have to pay a portion of it back in addition to that. So we certainly don't want to do that. But we know if, for instance, the roof is a good example. If the roof went $2 million plus our operating budget is not enough to cover, a significant portion of roof repair.
So you mentioned with the implementation of the esports center, you guys have been focusing a lot on student feedback with that. But what has been kind of like general most like student requested improvements within the union?
The most requested improvements in the union. If we go back to the survey that we did, it was they want a grocery store, and they want study space and the food. Those always are the three things that students will, one of them, two of them we can't do anything about, but we do work with our partners, but that rose to the top of what students want to see. The food prices are always a part, it's a component of the union, right? And so that's why it was in the survey. So they'd like to either see different food options or more value meals. I know people were looking for like a value menu when we had Wendy's on there, something that where you can get like $1 or $2 or $5 meals and things like that. So we see that a lot. We take that back to our food service partners to let them know this is what students are wanting. But the bathrooms on there, we get feedback on cleanliness of restrooms and things like that. The study space was amongst the top of what students really want from the union. And we will launch that survey again. We did it in 2024. We'll launch it again in the next year or so.
Could you expand more on what exactly the $100,000 in recurring funding is helping to offset cost-wise for the esports center?
Yes. So were you talking about what we pay for?
The costs, yes, overall, or exactly what would be helping to offset with that $100,000.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's that $100,000 recurring would just help the bottom line. So it will help the entire Reitz Union budget, right? And we just point out esports and that's the big lift right now in terms of what we added on that we can help with that recurring thing. But it would help us to maintain that, and that contract is for the next 5 years. And again, it's so that they can keep everything running in there, keep all the peripherals clean, updating the library, our student, what else is in there? Student assistance, things like that. So it will basically keep that operation alive and going.
Yeah.
That lease contract is $140,000 a year. It has an escalator clause of 3% each year, so each year it's going to go up $6,000 or $8,000 a year. So it's to offset that lease.
Yeah, and the cost of all, anytime you build a new space, there's the cost of maintaining, right? So esports has a high cost. It's high-end computers, high-end gaming equipment. And so that 144 we think is a reasonable cost. If we look at other universities that we compare to, they have staff they're paying upwards of that amount in just staff to maintain those things, and so we're choosing to pay that to a third party rather than have that dedicated staff member, which gives us more protection. If that person leaves, then we leave ourselves a big hole. And this third party company has more resources that they can pull from across the country and in different places to come and fix things and keep things fresh. And they've done a really excellent job. So we think $144,000 is a reasonable cost for an esports center like that. We think it's actually a pretty cost-effective solution for a space like that. But it definitely hurts, right, to have to We don't charge students for that space. The only revenue we've explored making on that at the moment is summer camps. And so actually this week we launched our first summer camp. So that's youth folks from the community coming to use the space. And so we are going to bill back that, but we don't charge students for use of the space. So we're certainly not, we don't have a avenue to make up that 144 without a budget allocation.
A little bit helps. And then the next 5 years, there's a capital and replacement plan for that, which is about 700, 800,000 to replace all of the peripherals, because we know electronics and those things get old quickly, and so we've also started to plan for that as well, put money aside to replace everything there.
I asked the same question to the rec sports people this morning. As a significant employer of students, are you guys utilizing work study students, federal work study? Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
How many, if you know the number off the top of your head?
Do you know that number? There's a fun report out there too, and I don't know the number, but I do know that they save us a lot of money, and there's a report that I'm going to go generate and get back to you, because that number is very helpful to me. I don't know how many, and I don't want to give you a false number, but once I figure it out, because I haven't looked at it for the year, but I'm hoping it's a big one again. But it does help the bottom line. Yeah. Well, I'll get it back to you. I'm going to bring it to you. I promise you that. Yes.
Can you talk about the cost to operate the robots and how that compares to the maintenance employees?
Yes, it is. Oh, we did well on this one, but we piggybacked on it. I won't see which one there.
So the cost of the maintenance, the cost of the lease of the robots is roughly, so it's $104,000 for 4 years. So it's about $26,000 a year, about $2,500 a month. And so let's just stick with the year cost, because I think that's the easiest one for us to digest. So $26,000 for 2 robots. It typically costs us, for an employee that we have, 32 to 36 in salary, but then you have to add 44.1% on top of that for fringe. And so we're looking $50,000 for a person, and we're looking at about 26,000 for 2 robots. And so it's about half an FTE for 2 of the robots. We do notice that, and just to, it's kind of a follow-up context, there's only so much a robot can do, though. I think that's the challenge. Like for one, we very proud of being able to keep people employed and make sure that the union is people-focused, and that we have a wonderful custodial team that can support us. But the robots can't clean a bathroom. They can't get in the toilet, get that clean for y'all, or do any of that stuff. So that's really important for us too. So what we're trying to do is find ways that robots can support our operations so that we can better utilize people where they can do tasks that only people can perform, and keep the people out on the floor where they can also interact with our guests and make people feel welcome and et cetera in the space.
Do you have the same amount of maintenance employees as you did prior to buying the robots?
You mean custodial?
It's custodial.
31 FTE.
We're down 1.
Yeah,
So
the FTE in the custodial was 31, and we're at 30 now.
Yeah. And we had custodial sees a lot of turnover in terms of staff retention. So if you can imagine, I'll just be frank, it's not the highest paying job around here. And so we do go through quite a few folks in that team. So we see about anywhere between 15 to 30% turnover in the whole team a year. We have recently hired a superintendent who's managed to keep that number very low. We actually have wonderful retention this last year, and so that's something that we're celebrating. And so we're keeping the same custodial team on. We're not losing that money in training and reinvesting in the people. But we did lose a number of our third shift at the same time, so that's the overnight team. And we made the decision to reduce the staffing on that team and then move forward with the autonomous robots. So that was something that we decided to do. So we didn't do anything with any people that we had, but we chose not to refill a position in in order to move forward with the autonomous robots. Yes, sir.
All right, we have time for one more question.
So you mentioned cutting your custodial staff from 31 to 30 as a result of the robots. Are you guys planning on cutting that number further to reduce your deficit?
Yeah, we'll always go back. Anytime a position opens up, we will consider whether or not we refill it. Cutting, we're not in that space yet until we need to be, and until you tell us we need to be. We're trying to stay away from that. Again, our staff are the lifeblood of this building, but we will do what we have to do. But when there is a vacancy, I always pause folks and say, we need to consider what the bigger picture is before we refill. And so that's how we did it with the third shift. And, for our second and first shift, it becomes really complicated because that is where we are the heaviest traffic in the building. And so it's hard to lose any members there.
We do look at, as Dwayne, I think, mentioned a bit earlier, we do look multiple years out and try to create that plan. I mean, if we imagine that these costs are going to increase 2 to 3% year after year, there is breakpoints, right, where we wouldn't be able to afford keeping the whole team. And so we look at that and we try to plan for that as best that we can. And so we have plans. We hope that we'll be able to redirect funding and be able to manage things. And that's kind of how we do this year to year, right? We create a budget every year. We make sure that we have the resources to make it through the year and we move on. If we're also seeing about 30% turnover, which we're not right now, but if we do have some gaps in paying folks while we're recruiting and rehiring. And so we can sometimes utilize that salary savings in order to keep us under budget, but retain a larger staff.
I'm going to go a step further too, that our SEC colleagues are always answering that question as well. And so many of our SEC colleagues don't even have a third shift anymore. They completely done away with it through vacancies and then some forced cuts. So we are always having those conversations with our colleagues across to see what they're doing and best practices as well. Unfortunately, we are trying our best to mitigate and keep where people where we need them, but we know things may not be great.
All right, thank you everyone. That concludes our time for discussion, and now we are entering 3 minutes of pro and con with 3 minutes for each section, starting with 3 minutes of pro now.
Yeah, I think partnering with a third-party company for hotel management is a really good idea, and I'm definitely excited to see how that kind of helps offset the deficit.
I'm also, in terms of like the whole robot cleaning thing, I really do like I appreciate the fact that how much money it is saving us, but also the fact that it's also not that you guys are, it's that you guys are withholding refilling a position rather than like firing somebody else. So I do respect that.
I'm a big fan of the student-led initiative for the study hall space downstairs. I think that's really good. And like you guys said in the survey, that's one of like the biggest things that students wanted was a place to study, so I really like that idea.
I like how seriously you guys are taking the esports lounge. I feel like that's a project that's very easy to, just halfway do it, but you guys are very on top of having state-of-the-art equipment and making sure that the student body has the best gaming experience that they could have. I appreciate that.
Adding on to that, I feel like you guys are turning it more than just into a singular room, especially looking into possible internships for esports students and also the living learning community. So would love to see both of those actually take place.
I really liked your comment on how that you're focusing a lot of the ANS budget onto things that students can feel and that they can like actually see the changes be made. I think that's a really good idea, and especially because students see the cost when they pay their tuition. So I think that that's a great idea, and it's a great way to keep students happy.
I like how you guys are utilizing the enterprise from the hotel to support the rest of the Reitz Union in addition to the AMSB.
I guess I'll speak for a second. Something that I think that was discussed today that I find incredibly promising and kind of I really like to see is that all the numbers for generated revenue, a lot of them have increased in the past year. Like the Arts and Crafts Center has gone up, event services is up around 30,000. So I love to see that there is, you know, a lot of work behind the scenes to kind of generate more, to kind of help the deficit that is becoming more and more of a problem. So I think that's incredibly impressive work and something that should be applauded, because it is promising to see that like the numbers are, you know, making a move every year in the right direction, even, you know, when costs just are skyrocketing across pretty much everywhere.
I can add, I think there's also a good balance between like just the sheer size of the union. There's going to be like maintenance and operational costs, but balancing that with making sure that there's still a lot of focus on like student experiences that are offered, like making sure that both of those bases are covered, but still taking so much of the students into consideration in that.
That concludes our first round of pro. We are now in line for 3 minutes of con. Starting now.
I could start, although we could see that you guys are making active efforts to reduce your deficit, can't be ignored that it did increase by about $150,000 from last fiscal year, from fiscal year 27 to fiscal year 28. So yeah, that seems to be a bigger issue as the years go on.
Yeah, I can talk as well. I think just with the deficit like that, I mean, at some point there is going to be an issue with a lot of the larger projects, you know, like replacing them and stuff. And you guys mentioned there's about $2 million in reserves, but I mean, if we're told that $5.5 million, which sets up as an issue.
All right, hearing no further con, we're now back in line for 3 minutes of pro, starting now. Hearing none, we are now back in line for 3 minutes of con, starting now. Hearing none, we are now back in line for 3 minutes of pro, starting now. And hearing none, we are now in line for final privilege with the Reitz Union.
Oh, yes. Wow, the closing arguments. Yes. You know what? I think, you know, I'm so proud of the team, and each year we go into this budget process, and you mentioned that we focus on the student-centeredness, but we are also looking at what is happening in and around campus. I know full well that in the next 4 years, we're looking at a new stadium, we're looking at new residence halls, we're looking at the Jacksonville campus. So my team has already begun thinking about what do those things mean, not just for the building, not just for the campus, but for the building, and how do we continue to serve. We're looking at enrollment numbers, we're looking at projections, and then we're also going to be looking at what the president is going to be doing. And so if you see initiatives that come from the president's office, you bet your bottom dollar that Reitz Union is going to figure out how we're in alignment with that, how we're in alignment with the division. And so a lot of these decisions are connected to those and what students are saying, and what our board of managers are saying that we needed. So we pride ourselves in being student-centered, student-driven, and being good fiscal stewards of the allocation that you all give us each year. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Do I hear any motions at this time?
I move to advance the Reitz Union budget request for the amount of $6,267,552 to second hearings by unanimous consent.
I hear a motion to move the budget request for $6,267,552 by unanimous consent, or to second hearings by unanimous consent. Do I hear any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Follow-up.
Follow-up.
I move to advance the supplemental request for $300,000 to second hearing by unanimous consent.
I hear a motion to advance the supplemental request for $300,000 to second hearings by unanimous consent. Do I hear any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Follow-up.
Follow-up.
I move to advance the recurring request of $100,000 to second hearing by unanimous consent.
I hear a motion to advance the recurring supplemental request of $100,000 to second hearings by unanimous consent. Do I hear any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Any further motions? All right, at this time, I adjourn this meeting at 3:24 p.m. Thank you, everyone.